following is a conversation with Alex Lal. Alex is a Vice President of Marketing and Communications at Riva Solutions, a leader who has had a fantastic journey through the private and public sectors. She also hosts the Mastering the Art of Failing podcast, which uncovers lessons from setbacks. What sets Alex apart is her ability to balance data-driven strategy with creativity and now add motherhoods to the mix. This is Pre-Zero Sports Talk podcast, and I'm your host, Sid Bensala. Our conversation will explore leadership, resilience, and how embracing failure can lead to remarkable growth. Let's get started. Alex, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
You've taken an unusual path through nonprofits, the private sector, and government contracting. Let's start from the beginning. What first drew you to the field of marketing and communications?
A paycheck.
Fantastic. That's
Yeah. So I have a undergrad degree in international business and history, and I didn't really come out of college with sort of an idea of what I wanted to do. But at my time, I had the opportunity to do a variety of internships. And I'll date myself a tiny bit, but social media was relatively new and just emerging when I was in college, and was something that a lot of my internships were just sort of handing over to interns, being the younger people who understood, platforms like Twitter and Facebook, and thought, hey, we should have a presence in some of these places, but, it's not something that our traditional marketing team needs to deal with at this current moment. So I got handed a lot of those responsibilities very early on, and started to build my platform in that sort of lens, is teaching people how to use these, getting some notoriety and some, marketing teams to understand, this digital marketing, social media marketing, it might be new, but it's not going away. And this is something we need to figure out a platform for, and figure out how do you integrate this with the rest of your marketing. And so that's really kind of where I started, was trying to figure out how do I leverage these, somewhat creative skills. I fancy myself a writer, I think, in terms of how I apply that. But very quickly sort of found a space in social media and being able to educate people on that new platform at the time. It's not quite new anymore. But yeah, really kind of fell into it. And then after a couple of years, saw an opportunity to continue down that path.
Yeah. And was there a specific moment or project that shaped how you approach leadership today?
That's a good question. I think I'm still learning, and every phase of me has a different piece of leadership to it. Becoming a mom this year has definitely been a humbling experience. The pace that I'm typically used to working at just doesn't work these days, especially being pregnant last year. Very humbling. And so I won't say there's one specific moment, but I'll say there's probably a variety of phases of moments where something will click, something will happen, and I'll say, wow, maybe I need to think about how I'm approaching this and take a different step in a different direction. But one thing that kind of sticks out in my mind, and I think I've learned a lot more of this, especially becoming a mom and having more humility and patience, is, at my last role, I was more in a consulting role. And I'm a pretty hardline type A strong personality. And I don't take myself that seriously, but I guess that perception is out there that like I can be, tiptoe around Alex, right? You don't want to piss her off kind of thing, which is not at all true. But I guess that's my persona. And I had a more junior consultant come up to me and said, hey, I'm going through this class where it teaches us how to like work with different personality types. And she's like, since we don't really get along that much, I picked you. And I was like, oh, ouch. I was like, okay. And that was probably one of the more recent moments where I sort of thought about it and was like, wow, I'm not really meeting certain people where they are. Yes, I have very high expectations, and, but I need to be a little bit more softer in some of these situations, especially now that I'm in a leadership role, where people are looking up to me, need to engage with me, and I need to figure out how do I lead, being true to my personality, but maybe meeting people a little bit more where they are.
That's really interesting. Usually, I always keep the following question in my last segment, which is the lightning round. But for the sake of this episode, going through your bio, I will ask you that question. If you could talk to your younger self, what advice would you give about finding direction early in your career?
Yeah, I think it's okay to pause and take a break. I'm the typical parentified eldest daughter, right? I've been overbooked and overstimulated since I was 5,
Okay.
6 years old. I have siblings who are 8, 10 years
Mhm.
younger than me. So, had a very much responsibility growing up to kind of figure it out on my own. My parents didn't go to college, so I didn't have a lot of people in my life who could help me guide through those processes. So on top of sort of the crazy amount of extracurriculars and things that my parents had stacked up, because they didn't have those opportunities, and so they abundantly gave me opportunities. I had to navigate a ton of things by myself. And I think because of that, I'm always moving. I'm always going. I'm one of those people that it's just kind of hard to take
Mhm.
a break, and I feel guilty about it. And I think, one of the skill sets that I've learned the most in my leadership journey is it's okay to pause, and it's very impactful to take the moment to listen. So spending more time listening to people than talking will get you sort of where you need to be a little bit faster. So I think, telling my younger self, like, it's okay to take a breath and figure it out, and listen. You don't always have to fill up the
And
space
how
by
hard it
yourself.
is to listen. Just listen. And sometimes you hold yourself.
It is very, very hard. A lot of people are so uncomfortable with silence. They feel like they have to fill it. Or, trying to make that connection point where you're hearing, someone
Mhm.
speak about something, and the human connection, you ultimately want to say, oh, I have a very similar story. Let me sort of interject with how, we're the same. And while that's helpful, and it definitely does build trust, I think, yeah, really taking that time to sort of pause and listen, and give some, just give
Mm.
people the time to vent, I think is very, very
Yeah, yeah.
powerful.
You've stepped into two challenging new roles recently, becoming a parent and hosting a podcast. How has being a new mom influenced your leadership style?
Yeah. Like I said, I think it's given me a little bit more patience and a little bit more humility. As before I had a family, I was very used to sort of running at a very, very quick clip and a very quick pace and having full control over my day, in terms of what my schedule looks like and being able to squish it all in. And now there's just so much unknown. I can make the best to-do list that I would love to. And then ultimately on the busiest day of the week, my daughter will get some daycare
Hmm.
germs and I'll
Yeah.
have to go pick her up. And that will completely, squish every plan I had for the week. Because ultimately, whenever she gets sick, I get sick, and then
Yeah.
my husband gets sick too. So we go through the cyclical cycle of, trying to work two full-time jobs. While also taking care of our daughter. So yeah, I think just a little bit of patience and a little bit more go with the flow, and having empathy for those around you too. That's been very important on my team. I have a team full of women, and we all have children or sort of in that part
Hmm.
of our life. So being able to cover for each other, for understanding that your family comes first because you're not replaceable in that piece of your life. Someone else will cover for you at work. We will handle it. Being able to step back and say, please take care of the things that you are not replaceable in, has been definitely a different flavor of leadership for
Yeah,
me
that's
this year.
great. What inspired the idea for mastering the art of failing, and what have you learned from your guests so far?
Yeah, sure. So about this time last year, I think I was like 7 or 8 months pregnant, and my former business partner at the time had just welcomed his first child. So he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I have an idea for a podcast." I was like, "Yeah, why not? We're both brand new, soon to become parents. Better time to start something absolutely new than when we're both trying to figure this out." So, Elliot is someone that I've worked with before, and we've always wanted to work with each other again. So jumped at the opportunity to work with him, and this concept was something that he brought to me. And again, as someone who is very type A, very perfectionist, get it done, it was a very
Hmm.
interesting concept to me because I think that failure is something that I struggle with, um, to be vulnerable. There are moments in my life I can look back and think like, wow, that was ridiculous. You should have just gone for it or done it. But not put yourself in those situations because you want to be perfect at something you've never
Yeah.
tried before is just unrealistic. So I thought it was a very important for a lesson for myself to learn to guide those conversations about these great grand plans that our guests have had, saying, I'm going to do XYZ and I'm going to do all of these things. And then the humbling moment where that doesn't work out. But the great lesson is that everyone is successful. Their path looks a little bit different. And so when you can go back and say, hey, I said I was going to do this, but actually I found something better in my life, I
Hmm.
think that's been amazing. So the common theme there is every single person had some great idea, and assumed that they were going to be the next best whatever. And almost none of our guests have ended up in that place, but they have all found success and meaning
Yeah,
across their
yeah. And
journey.
Alex, do you see connections between managing a team and navigating the instability of parenting?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes our colleagues need some
Hmm.
parenting, right? So those lessons are definitely helpful. I laugh, my daughter's 10 months old, so we're not quite in the
Hmm.
no moving around toddler phase yet. We still have a very, um, easy child who can sit there and sort of play by herself, and it's not mobile yet. So we're in a really good spot. But I did joke with my colleague the other day that I think I'm very well versed for toddler life, because that's just, dealing with so many
Hmm.
personalities across, not only internal folks, but vendors and partners and things like that. I'm pretty good at managing personalities and unrealistic demands, I will say, at this point in time. So yeah, I think there's a lot of synergies between it, and finding empathy, I think, is really the core message across all of it, especially with children, right? They process things differently. They're in a learning phase. They're experimenting. They're not trying to, do something to piss you off on purpose. Most of the time, they really truly are learning and looking to you for examples. And I think that's true of a lot of individuals who you interact with on teams too. Especially if you're a manager and have some younger individuals on your team, they're asking questions, they're making mistakes, and it's not, to waste your time. It truly is a learning experience. And so you have to give everyone a little bit of grace and remember that at one point that was you. So I'd rather take the time in my day to educate someone, explain something, walk them through the process, teach them to fish essentially, so that next time someone can be a little bit more self sufficient to complete the task
Yeah.
on their own.
And still on that topic, the most challenging from a leadership slash parenting point of view is when the kids they reach preteen and teenagers. So let's talk about it in a couple of years.
Yeah, I've got a
Yeah.
while, so not looking forward to that. We got to get
Yeah,
through
because
walking
this
and
period is
tough.
sweet, is really nice, and they grow so fast. And
Right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Alex, you've gained a reputation for leading small but mighty teams. What are the core values you emphasize when building a team?
So we don't have the luxury of having a lot of specialists on our team. And the longer I've sort of been in my position, the larger our scope has gotten. So I came on to build a marketing team, which then evolved into a marketing and communications team, and then events kind of fell on our plate too. And now I'm taking on some additional roles to help with, company vision and strategic planning. So, we just keep adding additional things on our plate. So, something that I look for really truly is the ability to be a
Hmm.
continuous learner, someone who is very driven, who is self sufficient and can figure it out. And what I always tell my team is like, don't feel bad about reminding me that I forgot to do something for you, or if you need something from me. So that ability to manage up is really important too, because again, my day is all over the place. Even with the best of intentions, something will drop because something else is on fire somewhere else, and that's going to take my attention. So I do need my team to be very vocal with me and say, I need this
Hmm.
X, or you need to look at review this, be here in this place, and not be afraid to sort of push, the priorities for me. Because at the end of the day, I'm here to make their job easier. And so I don't want to also be a block to their success because my calendar happens to be very crazy. So yeah, so someone has a positive attitude, can do,
Hmm.
very driven to make an impact, and the ability to cross collaborate. As I said, we're a team of moms. So we have to be able to pick up for one another when the time is there and to pay it back when you're around and someone else's kid is sick and home from daycare. So yeah, those are kind of the core skill sets that I look for to have a very high impact team.
And what's the common mistakes leaders usually make when managing small, versatile teams?
I think being too prescriptive, micromanaging is very easy when you have a
Hmm.
smaller team because you want something done a certain way and you have the visibility into, the couple of team members that you have on your team. So it's a lot easier to sort of impact the way that they're doing things. Typically, how I like to manage my team is, you set a common vision, how they get there. I'm not really that concerned about it. As long as we sort of get to the end product and the end outcome at the end of the day, that's what matters. Of course, if someone needs help figuring out
Mhm.
what that process looks like, that's my role to help them with that. But everything we do does not have to be so prescribed that I have to manage every single part of the process, to oversee, to make sure that it gets done the way that I want to. And especially in a creative space, sometimes I have ideas that are probably crazy to the
Mm.
next person. So I always want to have the opportunity to get really cool and creative and new ideas from my team too that maybe I didn't think about. So I like to leave the door open in terms of creativity and process, and really sort of focus on what's that outcome we're trying to
Yeah.
achieve together.
Alex, I had many guests talking about leadership styles and talking what leaders should do, should not do, etc. And there is one common topic that always comes up that as a leader, I need to empower my team, etc. etc. And then we get into the nitty gritty explanations. Can you just for our listeners explain in a simple terms what empowering a team means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Empowering to me means that they have the ability to launch, to make an impact. It's my job to sort of set the vision and set the vision in alignment to what the company is trying to accomplish. But I need to give them the tools and the authority, to go off and make an impact to be able to achieve
Mhm.
those goals. So removing barriers for them, making sure they have the tools and the templates and the information that they need to make smart decisions, and ultimately get us to that
Yeah,
outcome.
yeah. Thanks. Balancing personal development with career advancement is something many professionals wrestle with. What's been the hardest part of balancing your professional growth with personal milestones?
Yeah, I think this year it's probably been timing. So I was on track to take the VP role, and that came 4 weeks before my daughter was born. So it was a whole
Mhm.
new set of responsibilities, and expectations on the professional side that happened again right before my entire world was flipped upside down and had to figure out how to take care of this tiny baby. So that's been really, really challenging, is trying to navigate two full-time, all-encompassing roles at the same time, when there's not a playbook really for either. And so it's like, as I said, it's been a relatively humbling year. I will say 10
Mhm.
months into it, I am feeling a lot more comfortable in
Mhm.
both roles, because I have successfully taken care of this, tiny child who is now a lot more stable, and a lot more
Mhm.
self-sufficient. So that's been very nice. But it's been, a balancing act to sort of figure out, where do I turn my attention today? What is sort of top priority? And where can I have the most impact
Yeah.
across?
If someone is feeling stuck in their career, what's one actionable step they can take to regain, let's say, momentum?
Yeah. I think something that's always really helpful for me is just having, like an outside perspective. So definitely, if there's a mentor or someone in your process that you can have a conversation with to speak through some of the challenges that you're seeing, I think that's always really good to just
Mhm.
get it out and see what someone else's opinion is. Even better if that person is not necessarily at your current company, so they're not entrenched in your day to day, because they can really provide you sort of an external perspective on, here's what I'm seeing and here's what I think the next steps could do. I also find a lot of inspiration. I'm an introvert, so I don't do this a ton, but conferences or any place where they're talking about sort of next
Mhm.
gen marketing or next gen leadership is always something that I, try to find the time to do a couple times a year. Because I always ultimately come out inspired with, here's a couple things that I can do tomorrow to get my team to do something brand new, or just seeing inspirational ideas from other brands or other companies that are doing cool things will always get sort of the wheels turning in terms of things that we can do as well. But I try to make time relatively frequently to, keep up on Harvard Business Review, other places that are turning
Mhm.
out this research, just to make sure that I'm on the right track. I love reading, I love learning. So that is always inspirational to me whenever I sort of hit a period where I'm feeling a little bit stale, is having conversations with others about, what have you done when you've hit these places? But then also finding, some creativity and inspiration, from other companies
Great.
and brands.
You've brought fresh creativity to traditionally stiff spaces like government marketing. How do you balance creativity with the need of data driven results in your campaigns?
Yeah. It's a little bit easier on my side because in the government marketing, I can't track as much data as you
Hmm.
can on the private sector side. So in that respect, we're not a traditional lead generation shop in terms of what, a lot of our private sector colleagues are sort of put in terms of the
Hmm.
metrics that they're chasing. So I'm really looking on more of the brand awareness side of the house and making sure that the message gets into the right hands. But this is true across all marketing. I think you have to know your audience to make sure that your content hits and resonates. And when you have an audience who is a little bit more open to some creative or memorable content, it's been fun to put some of that out there and see, oh, okay, like these are humans at the end of the day, right? Just because they work for the government doesn't mean, they're boring or robots. They still watch pop culture. They still watch TV and other things like that. So we can pull some of those references in. But it's been fun to see people come out of the woodwork and say, hey, one of the pieces that we put together that was probably the riskiest thing that we put out there was an Office parody video. But a lot of people like the show The Office. And so that really resonated and was something that, for a long time, people came up to me and said, I absolutely loved that video. And it wasn't something that we intended to put out there in terms of external marketing. But we got such good feedback from the internal launch that we said, YOLO. Like, well, we can delete it if everyone hates it. But yeah, it was fun to see that sort of come to fruition. And years later, it is still something that people mention to me. So we know that we made an impact
And what
there.
lessons about storytelling have you learned from working across industries?
Again, I think, knowing your audience, and at the end of the day, people are people. When you're in a marketing role, people always want to sort of push the company message. And yes, those are things that are very important. But especially in a services industry, at the end of the day, we're selling the people. You want to feel like you can trust and have a good experience with the individuals who are coming to
Hmm.
do the work. So we like to put people forward a lot. And we're in a very mission oriented space, supporting the US federal government and work that they do. And last week, we just were able to put out a really, really cool piece that blended a lot of different core concepts that we're working on. We are traditionally a remote workforce. So, we do have an office. We go in every once in a while, but, for the most part, we're flexible and you can sort of work from anywhere, if you will. And so one of our VPs of growth, big personality, driving a lot of growth, sales, business development, things of that nature. But most people don't know she actually grew up on a farm in
Hmm.
Iowa and goes home quite frequently to farm, like to
Yeah.
drive the tractor to help plant, to do harvest. And so one of the customers that we support is, US Department of Agriculture. And so it was really cool to put a highlight piece together to talk about not only our flexibility that
Hmm.
allows her to go back and forth from DC to Iowa to support the harvest and the farm, but we're directly supporting the mission of our agency, which is to support small time farmers. And so we both live the mission on both sides. So it was really fun to put that piece together to talk about, both sides of her personality and the awesome things that she does in alignment with the customers that we
Yeah.
serve.
Yeah. Great story. Let's talk about lessons from failure. Failure isn't just part of the journey, it's a powerful teacher. So, what's the most surprising thing you've learned from your podcast, having the guests about overcoming failure?
I think pretty consistently, everyone has a vision for where they were going or something that they thought they were going to accomplish. And ultimately, no one got there, but they got somewhere better.
Hmm.
I think that was pretty much the thing. And the first episode, when I talked to my co host, we had a different description of sort of what brought us together in the first place. So I think I mentioned before, you and I stood up an organization probably about 10 years ago called Digital District. And the point was to help individuals sort of understand and learn this new, at the time, market of digital marketing. And we set out, we had a really cool run. I was 23
Hmm.
at the time, leading this huge team, doing these really cool events in places that I had no sort of business being at that age with really no experience. And my coworker was the same. But we had these big grand plans of, hey, we've established this chapter in DC. We're doing so well. We're going to take this thing like stateside and open new chapters, and we're going to go global, and we're going to do all of these things. And very quickly realized that that was just
Hmm.
not possible. We had not done the work to build up a succession plan for DC. And so once we started to pull back and think of other markets, the chapter that we had built, and the team that we had built started to crumble because no, we weren't paying anyone.
Yeah.
This was free. We were hoping that this was eventually going to be a full-time gig, but no one was willing to do that amount of work for free. So we very quickly hit this whole pivot where we were like, wow, this is actually not
Mm.
going to go anywhere. And we can't even really continue to float the organization that we have now. So after a couple of years, we had to sort of, close it down, because we just couldn't maintain both of them. And we were in different places in our
Mhm.
lives too. And so that was a part of it. But, when we started this conversation about failure, I hold Digital District as probably one of my biggest successes and also my biggest failures. Because we ultimately had a great ride, but at the end of the day, the goal that we set out, we did not accomplish. We had to
Yeah.
shut the organization down, and it did not become this full-time, role that we thought it was
Mm.
going to be. And once we kind of dug all this back up, he was like, I never really thought about it that way, but we didn't. But at the end of the day, we learned a ton of great management lessons. Going back to leadership at 23, I had no business bossing around these 30 people on our team. And I learned a ton about myself and how to interact with others in a good way, in a bad way. But it really sort of set me up to say, hey, I don't know a lot about business. And you kind of have to in some places. And some things we certainly figured out and some
Mm.
things we didn't. But that's kind of what led me to go back to business school, to be a consultant, to learn more about it. We tried our darndest and we failed at the end of the day, but we had a great time doing it. And I think that's the other key thing that we've heard from a lot of our entrepreneurs and guests is that, um, you know, maybe when you're very close to the failure, it feels a little bit shameful or you're not ready to talk about it. But years later, when you look back, it's a lot of great laughs and people had, a great time doing these things. And again, they ultimately didn't end up where they
Mm.
thought they were going to, but in most cases, still successful and in a
Yeah.
much better
Yeah.
place.
And how has embracing failure changed the way you lead today?
I will be the first person, to say to my team, "Hey, I have an idea. It's either great or terrible. So please tell me
Mhm.
which it is." And I think when you're in a place of leadership and you have individuals who are looking to you for guidance, or you have people watching your career that you don't even know about, you have to be the first person to sort of be comfortable being wrong and failing. Because I like to put that out to my team that it's okay to have crazy, wonky ideas. They might be fantastic. We might run with it and it might be amazing, or it might fail and people might not get it and they might not like it. But if I don't put that out there and be willing to be publicly wrong or have something fail, that doesn't create that safe space for my team to do something similar. And so I think being able to be, again, a little bit, don't take yourself so
Mhm.
seriously, right? We all have a goal at the end of the day that we're trying to accomplish, but I want people to have fun. I want my team to enjoy what they do. You spend so much time with your colleagues, that I don't want it to be something that people don't like coming to work or don't feel like they have a creative outlet, especially in a marketing space. So yeah, I've tried to embrace a little bit more of that, to be the first person to
Mhm.
fail, to lead the way for my team to have some cool ideas as
Great.
well.
Now it's time for our lightning round. Ready
Okay, let's
for
go.
speedy Q&A? Let's do
Yes.
that. What's a book, podcast, or movie that's deeply influenced you?
The Stranger
Hmm.
by Camus. Strange choice, I know. Yeah, so I fancy myself an existentialist. I think you have to give life meaning. And so anytime in my life where I've sort of gotten stuck or overwhelmed, it's the first thing that I grab off my shelf to reorient myself that I have created this. And that it's okay to step back, and reshuffle, because ultimately you are giving whatever it is sort of this attention, this priority, and this meaning. And so it's okay to step back, reset, and start over.
What's the best way to unwind after a long day or a week?
I usually grab my
Hmm.
Kindle, so reading. But with an infant, I think watching her learn something new has always been really cool too. She's really big on
Hmm.
clapping right now, so watching her clap is
Yeah,
awesome.
great. Alex, if you could instantly master any skill, what would it be?
Hmm. I grew up playing a lot of instruments,
Okay.
so I think that would be really fun. I haven't kept up with it, but I do have a guitar sitting in the corner that I would love to be
Hmm.
able to learn. So I'll
That's
say
great.
guitar.
What's one thing people will be surprised to learn about you?
Maybe not surprised if you follow me on Instagram, but I'm actually a power lifter. So that's how I spend all of my mornings. And I'm chasing a 400-pound deadlift.
Fantastic. Good luck.
Thank you.
What's the motto or mantra that keeps you grounded?
Probably, just do it. Again, sort of going back to, being able to embrace failure. I think people hold a lot of anxiety because they're worried that someone else is watching or that someone else is going to judge them. And so they're going to look silly in the eyes of others. But I'm here to tell you that most people aren't paying attention. They're really just worried about themselves. So you can go out there and try something and completely fail, and people are not going to remember.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee. Iced coffee.
Great.
Iced coffee.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Take the seat, take up the space. I think the book Lean In came out, very early in my career. And it was something that I actively saw in a boardroom that I was at. I sat down, 22-year-old me, 23-year-old me at this table with lots of men who were much older than me. And I took my seat. And a couple women came in and took seats in the back and didn't sit at the table. And I just thought that was absolutely crazy. So I will say take the seat. Even if you don't think you deserve it, you absolutely do.
That's a great one. Yeah, fantastic. If you could have a dinner with a historical figure, who will it be and why?
Going back to, my roots in music, there are a lot of artists that I would love to sit down and have a meal with. I think Amy Winehouse is fantastic, a talent that got lost very early. So I think she would be great. Similar, Kurt Cobain, Nirvana is one of my favorite bands. So I think that would be a great dinner conversation as well.
Amy Winehouse, good pick. Yeah. If you could live anywhere in the world for a year, where would it be?
I do love Sweden, but it's a little cold. So,
Not in the summer.
we spent some time. That's true. I've only been in the winter for whatever reason. But my husband and I spent some time in Thailand during our honeymoon, and I thought that was a really cool culture, fantastic food, and it was a chance to sort of slow down a little bit. So I think I would love to go back to Thailand.
What's the last thing you learned that blew your mind?
That's it. I don't know that I have a good answer to that one. I always love those TikTok videos where they're like, let me mess with your perception of history. And then they always list out, the things that happened at the same time where, like the pyramids were closer to, our time than they were Cleopatra's, like things like that, where I'm just like, what? Like history is so wild. You have this sort of linear piece in your mind and, none of that lines up with time.
What's a guilty pleasure you enjoy unapologetically?
Probably my plant collection. It started during COVID because, I was living alone and wanted something to take care of. And so now I have an insane amount of plants inside of my house, but I do really enjoy taking care of
Which
them.
kind of plants, if I may ask?
This is a pothos behind me. I've got some ZZ plants over there. I've got a ton around me, but mostly leafy growing, vine-like
In
plants.
Sweden, we are fan of indoor plants, especially for winter, so summertime, because the days are longer. And if you could instantly switch careers, what would you do?
Yeah, my corporate life goal is probably to open a gym. But I actually just had a conversation about becoming an adjunct professor. So I really love school. I'd love to go back and get my doctorate. So I think either gym owner or adjunct professor, totally different things, but I love both.
Excellent. And lastly, if you could give an advice to our listeners on any topic.
Yeah. I'll just go back to kind of what I said before. If you want to try something new or learn something new, just try it. The only person who truly is holding you back is you. It's okay to fail. It's okay to try new things and not be good at it the first time. No one is. So take that risk if it's something that you're interested in.
Great. Alex Love, thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having
And
me.
before we wrap up, could you let our listeners know the best way to connect with you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach me on LinkedIn, Alex Stevens Love, or you can check out our podcast at failingpod.com.
Thank you again, Alex, for this honest and insightful conversation. I hope our listeners take away the same sense of inspiration and practicalities I felt through this episode. I will leave you with this quote from Theodore Roosevelt: "It is hard to fail, but it is worse never to have tried to succeed." Thank you for listening to the Pre-Zero Sports Talk podcast. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and finding growth in every challenge.